All right, this will probably be the final video that I do. I can't really see myself doing any other, actually, come to think of it, before doing the draft, which I may or may not video record. I will video record the draft one way or another, but I may or may not end up, I don't know, streaming it or even uploading it. We'll see what happens. Anyway, I still think it's kind of fun to look at the players from 1968. And so in this case, I want to look at who is available in 1968 that I haven't already protected for the original six teams. And yeah, so I have them ranked by position. And this is the first one here. These are goalies. Gump Worsley here with a bit of an asterisk. Worsley, I have him first. Not necessarily that he's number one. And with these rankings, you shouldn't consider necessarily that, okay, well, he has them in this order, so they're 1, 2, 3. Maybe sort of like a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. But even that, I'll admit, is a little rough. So Gump Worsley here, he is... he had a really good year in 68, though he only played in the 40 games. With the big thing with Worsley, again, the 198 goals against average, and just really good, playing behind the Montreal Canadiens defense really sort of bolstered his stats and allowed him to have a late career year at 38. That's the one thing going against him here is he is 38 years old. On the other hand, Doug Favell. Favell is 22 at this time, 22 going on 23. Bruce Gamble. Can't remember actually with Gamble. I want to say about 20. He was in his upper 20s. I have it written down here, but not within arm's reach. I decided I want to be a little more concise this time, so I don't want to be looking up ages. Like Glenn Hall, I'm pretty sure was like 36 at this point. Bernie Parent is also 22, and actually I did a little reading up last night because, again, I'm assuming that I'm going to be a GM. I'm going to be a scout looking at these teams. How do I say this? Like looking at each team as I try to zoom in there as well and multitask, which I'm not good at, but I guess I'm trying to look ahead just a little bit for each team because, again, in real life, they would have tried to look ahead a little bit and just get a rough idea of who they want. And so between Favell and Perron, actually, by the end of 68, Favell's health had already become a question. He was battling injury a little bit. And so even though his numbers are slightly better than Perron's in 68, oh, now you can't, you know what, I had to zoom back out. Goodness, I had it right the first time. So even though Favell had the better numbers than did Perron in 68, I still feel like consensus would have been, even at the time, that Perron is the better overall prospect with the better overall future, and that this is just one season with an expansion team. Glenn Hall and Seth Martin. Seth Martin, who did get into 30 games that season, but he is 34 years old. Seth Martin, who I believe is known more, I've read more about him, having represented Team Canada at various international tournaments, where I think World Championships and things like that. Probably even Olympics, actually, come to think of it. I'll have to go and have a closer look. I think it was Ken Dryden who remarked prior to the 72 summit, oh, so Seth Martin's going to play for Team Canada. Wait a minute, I am? That sort of thing. Anyway, Cesar Maniago, Charlie Hodge, and Les Binkley, again, maybe consider this sort of a tier 3. Binkley actually pretty good there with Pittsburgh in their expansion season, played in 54 games. Charlie Hodge, again, at this point, well into his 30s, but decent numbers with an expansion. Oakland Seals at that, and then Maniago as well with Minnesota. I mean, these are the top 9. I would anticipate that most, if not all, of these goaltenders will be taken. And then what's in the back 9 here, these are kind of a little more in the bubble. Hank Bassin, actually, to be honest, probably not. I probably shouldn't have him there. Although, I mean, he does have good numbers through 25 games. So I guess in Bassin's case, what would go for him is if the goaltender the team has already protected is their starter that played close to every game, which there weren't as many of in 68, at least not for the original 6 teams. Jacquemin sticks out really as being kind of the only one. I think he played in like 68 or 69 of 74 games. So Bassin, again, not trying to look ahead too far, could be a fit for a team like New York, but we'll see what happens. Eddie Johnston, only 28 games, but he's pretty experienced. Wayne Rutledge, again, I have to be careful, or this will actually be a longer video. Wayne Rutledge there for Los Angeles. And so, again, suffice it to say, Terry Sawchuk, not great numbers that season. I don't know. I mean, if Detroit looks to acquire a veteran goaltender and with, hopes, again, if this were real, that Crozier might come along, because Crozier's still kind of in his early mid-20s then, maybe they look to somebody like Worsley, who's coming off an outstanding season, whereas Terry Sawchuk, sure, he was part of the Stanley Cup winning Maple Leafs the season before, but not a great year with LA. And so, again, it's a combination of things that I'm considering. Another one that I'm considering is because he had a bad year, it means he has a bad card. Whether or not that's justified, whether or not that's a reflection of his actual abilities, when you're computing a game, the numbers are all you have to go by. So Sawchuk, just kind of bad card. And again, anyone who wants to scoff at my snubbing of Henri Richard there in the first couple of videos and things like that, same thing, bad card. So Dave Dryden, Gary Suitcase Smith, and then Roy Edwards and Gary Bowman probably not going to be drafted, but just, put them there anyway. Bill White, Bob Bonn, and Leo Boivin, again, possibly your tier 1 defenseman, really, defensively very sound. Bill White, of course, he'll contribute offensively as well. Leo Boivin, 35. Bond still only 31. Bill White, I'm pretty sure somewhere in his 20s, mid-late 20s. Mike McMahon Jr., I remember, was 26. Defensively, not quite as good, but the offense, you get offense with McMahon. Dale Rolfe, if you want more defense. And Barclay Plager as well. I think these guys will all, these 6 here especially, will all go pretty early in the draft. Al Arbor, I believe, was 35 this year, so he could be a little further behind, but I'm going to also, these teams know that they will be able to draft and switch over a third of the roster every season as this, progresses, evolves, or whatever into the 70s. And so I think that they'll be a little less reluctant to take veterans in some rounds than you might have in real life in a situation like this. So again, Al Arbor has good card, and maybe a team, again, going back and forth between fantasy and reality here. If you have a team with a younger blue line, you might look to add Al Arbor to it. Bob Wojtowicz there for Minnesota, and Ed Van Impe there for, what I want to say Chicago, because I'm used to handling him with the Blackhawks in the 60s, but he did play with Philadelphia that season. Van Impe, who can intimidate, pretty good defensively, as is Wojtowicz, but without the intimidation, without the penalties. Don Orey as well. I think I spoke well of him in the last video. Same with Ernie Brown. Noel Picard here for St. Louis. And Terry Harper, Burt Marshall. Marshall seemed to be sought after for one reason or another. He was young at the time. I kind of get it. I get that. Harper, as I mentioned before, there's 28. And Bob McCord. So you can see here actually with the defense, pretty balanced. This is 6, 12. So your top 18 defense, Dallas Smith, Al McNeil. I put Larry Cahan there. I'm not sure, actually, again, given his age. I think he was 34. His defense is also 3 and 4 if he gets drafted. Elmer Vosco, who was still only 32 at that point. I thought he'd be a little bit older. The other Plager who, defensively he's good. So if you're just looking for a pure defensive defenseman, he's pretty good at that. Pete Reagan, who was in his mid-30s at this point. Kent Douglas. Douglas is only 2 and 2. He may actually, in fact, still get drafted, though, because he did have a little more offense that he provided, though he is also a penalty risk. And despite being a penalty risk, he doesn't really intimidate or anything, so he's got that going against him. The aforementioned Hellman is kind of fringe, kind of bubble. Though I have him behind here, again, this is not a perfect ranking. J.C. Trombley, because he can provide some offense as well. He had 30 points in 73 games. Not bad for a defenseman. For a blue line offensive production there that season. Just 4 goals, but still the 30 points. And Bob Wall as well. Bob Wall, because left defenseman John Mizuk there as well for Philadelphia in that opening season. Marcel Pronovost, who was 37. Noel Price, Joe Watson, Jean Gauthier, Doug Jarrett there for Chicago. So they didn't protect him. And can't pronounce it, but goodness, I see his name all the time now because he plays for... I'm going to embarrass myself. Which team that did not win last night did he play for the 63? See, again, that's why I don't have the 63 WHL on camera yet. I'm still getting, better informed on those guys. But he scored a goal last night in WHL hockey action. It was toward game's end. It was for either Calgary or Seattle. That's embarrassing that I do not know the exact answer to that. I have to go back and brush up on my 63 WHL. He did score a goal toward the game's end in a game that his team was losing for one of those teams. Okay, so, and I didn't video record that game, but I do have the results up on Delphi, Penalty Box, Tabletop Sports. Derek Sanderson, that's right, Boston still hasn't been able to. I sense that Boston's really trying to do something under the table to make sure that they do not, in fact, lose him. They might even want to do similar for Fred Stanfield, who's that's a pretty potent card as well in his own right for Stanfield. Of course, with Sanderson, he can intimidate, but then Stanfield can pass. Sanderson has the higher range, but with that, he doesn't take as many shots. He did have a few more goals that season, though. So really, Boston's issue here is kind of two-tiered. Of course, Stanfield, he did come over from Chicago. Maybe identified a little less as Bruin, though I shouldn't say that because he was there for the Bruins championships. Red Berenson as well, I've talked about him and what the expansion did for him. Phil Goyette, and the only reason why Goyette really is on page 2 is because of his age, 34. I think he'll still go relatively early, as well the Jet Joyelle. Ralph Backstrom, offensively no slouch, 20 goals, 45 points, 3 he can penalty kill, and he can forecheck. Ray Cullen, 53 points here. Cullen from Minnesota, actually I should mention, there were a couple of names yesterday, Cullen and Connolly among the Minnesota Cards, that because I got off on a tangent talking about Bill Masterton, I just wanted to explain why, respectfully, I'm not going to include Masterton as part of this replay, because it wasn't the season that Masterton played. And so after that, I was just, I want to say too, I think something else happened. I heard a noise, something somewhere, whatever, and it just threw me off. And so I put the cards down and went to the next team. Ray Cullen. Pip Martin, talked about him a little bit already. Bit of a down year for him relative to the rest of his career, some of the rest of his career, not that I would know that. Orlin Kurtenbach, he plays in the WHL as well. Didn't get any points there last night, but I will be seeing him soon one way or another, or in both ways, both leagues. Kurtenbach, again, I mean, the numbers aren't terrible there, 15 goals and 35 points, and so assuming that I'm going to need about 17 or 18 more centers to stock this league, right now we're up to 6. So I guess I have Kurtenbach in my top 9. Henri Richard. Oh, and these are just pure centers, I should mention. So centers that also have like a center/left wing or center/right wing, I put them elsewhere. Henri Richard, I decided this is about where he comes up. Now, again, for all the negativity that I've handed his card in his 110 scoring range there, he does have a pass bonus. He's okay defensively. He can forecheck. He is better than average on faceoffs. So, and he is a Habs legend. So what I'm going to do with him, I'm already saying this politically. You might wonder, well, why are you doing the draft then? I think if this were real, they do try to get him back in the later rounds, does Montreal, unless there's a team that's really hurting for centers and they happen to come up on the wheel. Labossiere, Charlie Burns, Terry Crisp again for the defensive. If you're looking for a defense first center, then I think you look to Terry Crisp. Campbell and Engerfield, to be quite honest, even though I do have them, I guess, in like my top 12 here. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if they get drafted. I guess it depends, like with the centers. So I have Hampson, Pulford, and Dave Ballone here for I guess my top 3 center/left wing. And so it remains to be seen, I guess, if these players, this is where it will get interesting. This is where I will confuse myself and be unable to look ahead. Not really confuse myself, just make it so that I'm not able to look too far ahead for any one team. If it comes up, if they're sort of the BPA, and if that team drafts them primarily to be used as a center as opposed to a wing or something like that, because they can play both, then that could actually hurt the chances of some of these pure centers, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Conversely, if these guys get drafted and thrown on the wing, then some of the pure wings, the left wing and right wing, it could hurt their chances. But yes, so I mentioned there Hampson, Pulford, Dave Ballone, Don Marshall, Andre Boudria, I should know because he did play for Montreal for a while in the 60s with Minnesota. Good season there, 53 points, can defend, can kill, can pass. Marshall can forecheck and defend. Don McKinney, 9 goals and 29 points, but only in 39 games and a +3 pass bonus. So as a pure passer, as a setup man, Don McKinney might be your guy. Mike Walton, Murray Oliver, Bob Dillabow. Hopefully you can see all those. So talked about some of these guys already. Dillabow is sort of like Terry Crisp if you're looking for a defense first there, I think. Stratton, again, these guys, I consider them to be very bubble. McDonald, Camille Henry, Camille the Eel, just, in the twilight of his career, really, at that point. Let's see here. Andy Bathgate, Wayne Connolly, and Jerry Melnick for St. Louis there. Again, Melnick looking pretty good here, 50 points, +2 pass bonus. Wayne Connolly, of course, 14 power play goals that season and 35 goals. So expansion, definitely, I mentioned this about Berenson and Joyelle. I think expansion definitely benefited the career of Wayne Connolly. So Connolly, again, this is a guy who had trouble remaining in a regular spot on a roster, and as recently as 67, he's going to be in the league in pretty good standing with a middle 6 role, probably a top 6 role for one of the expansion teams. And in that top 6 role, once I start rolling out the games, if Connolly's producing and his top line right wing, center right wing counterpart is not, then Connolly could even see himself bumped up to the first line. Injury could also put him there. Andy Bathgate, What's going against Bathgate and why Bathgate isn't here a little higher is that he is, actually, no, he is in page 1 of center right wing, so I stand corrected. Yep. Andy Bathgate, again, 35, 36 at this point, mid-30s, but still +2. He can screen, he can defend. Tommy Williams, surprising to me, only 27 at this point with a pretty good season. I have to pretend that going forward, I'll have to take another look at Tommy Williams' career, except maybe not until after the draft. Bruce McGregor coming along there nicely for Detroit, 15 goals, 39 points, can kill penalties. And Frank St. Marseille, again, probably not likely to get drafted. Sorry. But he's there. Doug Moens for pure left wing. I could have put Trombley in his spot. Prentice gets over here because of his age. He was in his mid-30s at this point. Again, between them, Moens can forecheck. 53 points. Trombley, 51. Trombley takes more shots. Trombley, the better defense rating. They're quite similar, though, in terms of value, these two cards. I guess Trombley, maybe, if anything, would be over here because of his age, would Jill Trombley. Ted Irvin, because that's how Chris Jericho, his own son, announced it. That's what Jericho calls him. So the mistake is Jericho's and not mine. If you think I'm wrong, it's his son's mistake. Ted Irvin, Dick Duff, Ab McDonald. Dick Duff actually, it's funny, he didn't take many shots, so he has a really high range, but he didn't take many shots. He only 111 shots in 66 games. Ab McDonald as well, pretty experienced NHL veteran by that point, would be a good acquisition. It's rumored, that's all I'm going to say, it's rumored that scouts and management are overlooking Dennis Hull's down year and that he could go earlier in the draft than he's been ranked. Just a rumor, that's all I'm going to say. Riel Lemieux there with, again, defensively, though he's got a bit of offense, I think defensively Lemieux is a decent choice. Brit Selby, because though he never really became an NHL name, we don't know that. He's a guy who had 15 goals with a good range, decent card, not defensively, but he's only 22. Gary Jarrett, Reggie Fleming, the aforementioned Reggie Fleming. These guys, again, kind of on the bubble. Depends on when, like, again, the dual position, the center left wing, when they end up getting drafted. And Larry Keenan. So for the right wings, Bobby Rousseau. John McKenzie, you might even argue, I don't know, back and forth. Again, they have different assets, some varied assets here. So between Rousseau and McKenzie, Rousseau is a few years younger. Bob Nevin, I think, was 29 there. Really, you can't go wrong, I think, with any of these three picks. These are all going to be great top 6 additions to their respective franchises. Luann Gotti as well. Again, Luann Gotti doesn't quite have the goal scoring, but he is a passer. He can kill penalties. He can forecheck. Jimmy Roberts doesn't have the offense, period, but again, defensively, I mean, he's like the best young right wing in this. Of course, there's Claude Provo as well. Floyd Smith, in just 63 games that season, had 24 goals. I think Floyd Smith will end up in some middle 6 scoring role. Claude Provo, as mentioned, really good. And really, if you look at his assets and those of Jimmy Roberts, that's kind of what he is. And I think that's even probably what he was brought along, to be in Montreal. They probably kept Provo out of loyalty after 67, or Roberts maybe wasn't coming along or unsatisfied or whatever the way that he wanted him to be. Anyway, I'm not going to speculate. I don't know. But very similar cards, but Roberts is like 10 years his junior. Roberts, who did, again, play into the 70s, played for the 77 Habs Cup-winning team. At least I know from the shootout experience. Not that I should know that, right, at this point in 68. Still going to call him Leon, 21 goals and good balance card. Dornhofer with just a good card all around, even if only 13 goals to go with it. And there's Gary Iman, Jerry, who might get in. We'll see, kind of on the bubble. As is Jordan Armstrong. Ken Schinkel, for the same reason, actually looking at... for what I said about Dornhofer, Schinkel... kind of as well, I guess. Like, defensively a little more sound. He could squeeze in. Gary Sabrin, honestly, probably not. George Armstrong, by way of his being the longtime Torontonian, the longtime Maple Leaf there, he might find his way back into it. However, getting in his way, we've got Cowboy Bill Flett. These are the W positions there, so just wings overall. Bill Flett, Jean-Paul Parise, or JP Parise, Eddie Shack, the entertainer. And Parise as well, I think, sort of like what I said about Dennis Hull. I think that he will go a little higher than his numbers. Although, it was only 44 games that he played that he did get 11 goals and 28 points. So, but still, I think I don't think I'm cheating or looking ahead to say that if this were real, teams would look to acquire Parise maybe a little better than his card and his numbers, or higher than his card and his numbers would merit. So again, I'm just trying to factor in a combination of variety of things. John Ferguson, Bill Hickey, Lowell McDonald, Val Fontaine, hopefully I said his name correctly, or Fontaine, I think it was Fontaine, like Pat LaFontaine. Can penalty kill. Good defensively, again, fringe, unlikely to be taken. McCreary, probably not. He's just there for a lark. Brenneman, Bill Hickey, again, kind of on the fringe. You never know. Ferguson, again, a team that wants a little more of a muck and grind. They might look to get Ferguson. Doug Robinson, Paul Andrea, Howie Menard, Forbes Kennedy, Gene Ubriaco, and Hoekstra I just put there just to round it out, so a good even number. And then I have Sullivan, Pappen, and Billy D. To be honest, among these final 6 or 12 cards here, probably only 2 or 3 of them at most, maybe not even that many, will be drafted, because I am going to run a tight ship. I'm going to have 21-man rosters. I'm going to have good free agents available for any of the rosters should they have trouble mid-season with injuries or just be struggling, especially in a shortened season with limited time, I guess, to try to make up for lost time lost to games and injuries and things like that. So I want to have a good free agent pool as well, and that will improve with each passing season. This will get more. This won't get more difficult with each passing season because the drafts and ensuing seasons will be shorter. What I'm doing here is I'm protecting, again, with the 21-man rosters. It means that for year 1, I'm having the teams protect 1/3 of the roster and then draft 2/3. For each season that comes after this one, I'm going to have the teams protect 2/3 of the roster. And then with the other 1/3, of those 7, so there's going to be a 42-player draft for 69 and 70 and so on. But of the 7 players that the teams are drafting, sometimes it will be a necessary replacement for a retired player. Other times it will be that the player, if I play this into 72, 73, the player went to the World Hockey Association. And so his card will have to be replaced. So probably of those 7 draft choices, maybe 2 or 3 on average will just kind of be necessary replacements. It'll be a little different. I think that draft will be a little different. So this is the first one. I want to start off on the right foot. If this is going to be a long-term project, I want to get that desired start. I want that teams that both have the combination, as I've said so many times already, of enough that they're recognizable as being that team, but also with enough different guys in the team that it's going to make it different and interesting, and it's not just going to be a straight replay or look like one. So, all right, thank you for any time that you give to this. Thanks for checking this out. Bye for now.